What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Post Up with David Grubb right here on Boot Crew Media. So glad that you could join me today. A lot to talk about with the New Orleans Pelicans, but first, I think the biggest thing today, before we get into what happened over the weekend, is just the kind of continued announcement that the Pelicans intend not to move anybody in the quartet of Zion Williamson, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones. That group isn't going anywhere. And I think, I think you're less inclined to be surprised about Zion. I mean, excuse me, about Herb and Trey, particularly as we'll talk about Trey in a minute. But I think the Zion part of this, and first Chris Haynes talked about this, that Zion, the Pelicans had no interest in moving him, that they had been letting the league know that they weren't. But I think part of this has to deal with the kinds of offers that the Pelicans have been getting for Zion Williamson. I don't think that they've been fantastic offers, and teams are moving on the idea that it's just not working for the Pelicans, and maybe they will sell for less than what they want. At the very least, I think you'd have to hope that this is just posturing by the Pelicans and that there is a deal out there for Zion. And, from some of the reports, they talk about how Dumars is encouraged by looking at the pairing of Zion Williamson and Trey Murphy. But, I think the duo of Clean and Murphy has played together for bigger stretches on the court. Zion and Trey have not generally won their minutes together. Yes, the Pelicans as a team are bad, but it has not been the same as it has been in previous years, because I said it several times. Zion at his best was when he was playing with Herb and Trey, and it had been borne out over the statistics over the previous couple of seasons. But that has not been the case this year. And when you look at the impact and you look at players just by looking at on-off rating, and that's not perfect. None of these metrics are perfect. But the thing that you notice when you look at on-off is how less impactful Zion has been. Zion has never been lower in his Pelicans career than third in on-off when he's played his minutes. Never been lower than third. This year, he's below Jose Alvarado. He's below Michael Peavy. He's below Trey Murphy. He's below Derek Queen. He's below Sadiq Bey. It's just a 0.5 difference between the Pelicans with Zion on the court and off the court. That's basically nothing. It's basically nothing. And the minutes are not that significantly different than they have been than they were last year. They're about 2 minutes to 3 minutes down from his career average, and certainly some of that has once again been impacted by injury. But overall, his minutes have not been significantly different than they were a year ago, but his impact is decidedly different than it was a year ago. So I would hope that at this stage of the season, knowing that the Pelicans, who are on pace for 16 wins right now, or 18 wins, 9-32. They're on pace for 18 wins, which would match the franchise's worst mark ever. What kind of future is Joe Dumars looking forward to? Because again, when we talk about the parts of this team that are going to take time to mature, and that leads us into the weekend, because once again, we saw how those young players need to mature, and some of these veterans are just not doing what they need to do. But, when you look at going from a 20-point win at Washington for the Pelicans, they win by 20 in Washington against a team that's, had just traded CJ McCollum and Corey Kispert. They had, they had not received Trae Young at that point. So you did not have, the full Wizards team. So beating them by 20, you're expected to do that. You had been on a 9-game losing streak. You had to win sometime. You beat a bad Wizards team. But what you wanted to see, I think, was follow-up. Could you handle success and win another game, particularly at a place where you have not done well? You had lost 8 in a row with Orlando going into that game yesterday. But you also, again, you had a Magic team that was not fully complete. Franz Wagner's not there. Mo Wagner making his first game back. Some of the components still missing from that team. So you weren't getting a full Magic team either. And what did you do against a team that was sputtering offensively for 3 quarters? Then all of a sudden, they started to pick it up slowly but surely, scoring more points in each and every quarter. Whereas the Pelicans fell off a cliff, first defensively in the fourth quarter, and then offensively in the final 4 to 5 minutes. It was a complete breakdown down the stretch. And I think the first part of it that you look at, because statistically, the Pelicans had more threes than the Magic. The Pelicans were even in points in the paint, which I think is a problem. Certainly, the Pelicans have to win points in the paint every night. Free throws were huge, and that's a big part on the defense. And that was atrocious in the second half in particular. The Pelicans were terrible defensively, and that led to a lot of fouls. Zion Williamson was awful on the defensive end. Trey Murphy at times was indifferent on the defensive end. And then the rookies, again, struggled at times. I thought Derek Queen played a solid defensive fourth quarter, but earlier in that game against Batazzi, he didn't do very well. I thought that Batazzi was able to, that two guys in particular were the catalysts for the Magic winning that game. Banchero, he had a Banchero game. Desmond Bane had a good, solid game. But the two guys I think that were ultimately the deciders of this game for Orlando were Batazzi and Black. Batazzi getting his first start of the season against the Pelicans, gets 14 points, 13 rebounds, 3 steals, and 2 blocks. He outdid the season averages of Wendell Carter Jr., who was averaging 13 and 7 this season as the starter. He doubled his own season averages. He came into the game averaging 6 points, 5 rebounds, 1 steal, and 1 block per game. So he basically doubled up his stats against that Pelicans front line, primarily in those Derek Queen minutes offensively. That's when they matched up with each other the most. And Batazzi was able to take advantage, particularly in the first half, on the offensive glass. Did a fantastic job for them on the offensive glass. In comparison, when you look at Derek Queen, 10 points, 3 boards, 6 assists, 4 turnovers. And those 4 turnovers were really bad early on. And then 4 fouls as well, which limited him to just those 19 minutes. Limited to a minus 19, a plus minus. Only Bryce McGowan was worse in plus minus amongst the starters on Sunday. And then you look at Anthony Black, a guy who's been hot lately. The Pelicans should have known that. A guy who'd been coming in, scoring 20 points a game over his last 10. He gives them 26.7 assists and 3 steals. So not only is he able to score, he's able to create transition opportunities for the Magic, which the Pelicans, as we know, do not defend well in transition. So Black puts up more points. He came into this game averaging 15 points on the season, 20 points over his last 10. You give him 26. So it's those points account for everyone who's missing and then some. And then on top of that, you allowed De Silva to come off the bench and go 4 for 5 from 3-point range. You continue to not defend the 3 and allow teams to shoot a high percentage. Even when the number is low, Orlando didn't shoot a large number of threes. Their percentage was still very high, in the 40s for the game. The offensive rebounding. Again, a major problem for the New Orleans Pelicans. The Orlando starters, this is just the starters. The Orlando starters had 11 offensive rebounds. The Pelicans starters had 3 offensive rebounds. That's embarrassing when you're talking about Derek Queen being out there. You talk about Zion Williamson being out there. We talk about the guys that should have been attacking the glass in these opportunities, especially when the Magic were not shooting the ball well, particularly early, and you still were not able to box out consistently. I thought that the bench, particularly Eve and Carlo and Jordan Poole, obviously stood out. Eve and Carlo combining for 18 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 blocks. I thought Eve was very active on the defensive end, continues to get better there, though offensively, and he had some great putbacks and some dunks as well. He took advantage of his minutes. And he needed to have a bigger rebounding game, but I thought defensively he played well, and I thought offensively he does what he can do. And I thought Eve, by and large, has been a much better defender than any of the other front court players over this past month as well. Nobody in the front court has been defending as actively, and then also trying to be aggressive, not just active, but aggressive. Eve is taking the physicality to his opponents as of late, more willing to throw his body around, whereas last year he didn't take or absorb contact very well. This year he's looking for it, and he's not scared of it. And then his finishing on the offensive end, he's getting much better. I thought Carlo shot the ball well, but of course, we'll talk about his status for the Nuggets and Pels, but for tomorrow. But I thought Carlo offensively, again, you see with those guys on the bench when they're going, what they can do offensively. And Jordan Poole's 6 of 8 from 3-point range. The only negative for him really on the offensive end was the turnovers. Some some bad periods of defense, but you can't ask for much. I mean, I think you understand typically that Jordan Poole is going to have some nights where he has turnovers, but when he's shooting that efficiently, as he did, 6 of 8 from 3. The only thing is, I think he probably got a little gun shy after the previous 2 games, and he struggled throughout this season in shooting the basketball. But he was very aggressive in the first half, not as aggressive in the second half with his shot, but he kept the Pelicans. I mean, he really saved the Pelicans, quite frankly, in the first half with his offense and was able to produce there. So I want to give him a lot of credit. But defensively, when you talk about the Pelicans, they allowed Orlando to shoot 52% for the game. That's their 18th game doing that this season. They're 1-17 when they allow opponents to shoot 50%. And I think that's just common sense. And if I told you that just telling you that record, I don't think anybody would be surprised that that's the mark. When you allow teams to shoot the ball well, chances are you're going to have to you're going to have to shoot incredibly well. And the Pelicans didn't do that, particularly down the stretch. I thought Micah Peavy had some assists on the offensive end. He's looking more and more kind of like that Herb Jones connector type, able to move the basketball, get assists, still needing to work on his shot, but able to put the ball on the floor, showing some athleticism on the court. I like where Micah Peavy is at this stage in his career. Yes, he needs to get more consistent with his shot, but that's why he's on the bench and that's why he's a rookie. But I think overall his intelligence on the court continues to show through. He does not come off as a negative most nights. And he was a big positive for the most part against Orlando, even though he did not make shots. Again, we talked about Orlando scoring more and more points progressively in each quarter. That shows you that the defense just continued to slide as the game went on, with them shooting 60% from the floor in the fourth quarter compared to the Pelicans just shooting 35%. And then they go 12 for 13 at the free throw line on some, at times, ridiculously stupid calls. Fouls by the Pelicans. They were playing defense with their hands. Trey Murphy had some stupid fouls early in the quarter, picking them up. And that's the thing for the Pelicans. A lot of their fouls were because they picked them up early in the quarter, and then they would allow Orlando to get into the bonus. And it just, the lack of discipline there would be fouls within the first minute of the quarter. And you just can't do that. And foul trouble at the wrong times stymied, I think, a lot of Pelicans runs. Derek Queen picking up 4 fouls, Trey getting fouls at different times. I think it was a problem for the Pelicans picking up cheap fouls against an Orlando team that you had to let them back in the game. Now, once the Pelicans did, they were able to close the door. But Orlando was floundering for most of this game, and the Pelicans were continuing to allow them to catch up, allow them to stay close. And even with that 7-point lead going into the fourth, you had to feel like, are they going to be able to hold on to this? Because you've seen this season play out as it has, and you've seen the previous seasons play out as they have. So when you look at this, this is pretty much the first game offensively this season where all 3 of your big 3, Zion, Poole, and Trey, had a good, efficient offensive game at the same time. And it still wasn't enough because the defense is so indifferent and so bad. To allow what they allowed in the fourth quarter, to play the way they played, when you allow a team to get repeatedly at the front of the rim, and you are allowing the rookies to feel their way out. But it just shows how the portions of this roster that need to be fleshed out, particularly on the defensive end, you just don't have enough. And yes, you could point to the fact that Herb Jones, Sadiq Bey, and Jose Alvarado are all sitting on the bench. And those are your better perimeter defenders, at least in effort and consistency. And you didn't have them available to you. But this Orlando team is not a great offensive team. I think that's the thing with the Pelicans, is that it's your level of production is not consistent enough to beat mediocre teams. The Magic are an okay team, but they have been beating the Pelicans consistently for years because they have attacked the areas where the Pelicans cannot defend. It didn't matter who was on the guard, who was guarding on the perimeter. You couldn't stop Desmond Bane. You couldn't stop Anthony Black. And inside, you could not defend and keep their centers off the glass. They didn't even have a tremendous amount of height available on the floor, but they were still killing you on the offensive glass. Guards were getting to the offensive glass. He said the Pelicans with 3 offensive rebounds compared to 11 for the starters on Orlando. That just shows the effort was not there. The consistency of effort was not there. And I think when you look at the impact, again, when we talk about Zion's lack of impact, the assists and the rebounds continue not to be there even when he's scoring points. He is scoring points efficiently, missing way too many free throws, but he's scoring points. His shots have been efficient, but he is not impacting the game in the ways that he used to and the ways that we are used to seeing him do it. And that is unfortunate for the Pelicans. But what we can do, we can look to someone who is playing well. Pelicans, some people always say, well, David, you're too negative. You talk too many negative things. I try to be truthful. I don't try to be positive or negative. I try to be truthful. Some things are positive, some things are negative, but the truth is not supposed to be, be shaded. I try. I am a human being. I mess up. I'm not perfect. I have my own personal, preferences and biases, things that I look for. And certainly I try, but let's be positive now. Let's talk about something that is good. And though I have criticized and I will continue to criticize Trey's defense, it needs to get better. Offensively, he's playing the best basketball of his career. And that's not hard to see. When you look at since December 1st, he's one of 5 players averaging 23 points, 6 rebounds, while shooting at least 50% from the floor and 40% from 3. The other 4 players, Jaylen Brown, Nikola Jokic, Anthony Edwards, and Kevin Durant. And since December 1st, that is a good sample size for Trey Murphy. He's one of 5 players doing that. You increase that number, you bring up just the rebounding. Add Trey into this in his last 4 games in particular. Over these last 4 games, 31 points, 7 rebounds, 4.5 assists, 1 steal, 1.5 turnovers, and he's averaging 21 field goal attempts per game. And we have talked about this before, the 20 attempt mark for Trey. Over these games, too, in this recent stretch, 54% from the floor, 42% from 3. For his career, when he takes 20 attempts, and most of these are in the last 2 years, obviously. For his career, the Pelicans are 6-12, 18 games that he's had at least 20 field goal attempts. Only 18 games in his career. I just told you the record, 6-12. But the distribution of points, this is the efficiency when Trey gets 20 shot attempts and why the Pelicans need to generate more shot attempts for Trey Murphy. This is elite efficiency that we're talking about. In these 18 games, 14 of them, he's had at least 30 points. And in 5 of them, he's had at least 40. Okay? When he's done it this season, in these 20 attempt games, he's averaging 36 points per game, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, shooting 58% from the floor and 42% from 3. In the games where he gets 20 field goal attempts. Then, on top of that, in those games, over his career, when you take all the games where he's taken at least 20 shots, he's averaging more than 1.5 points per field goal attempt. More than 1.5 points per field goal attempt. Now, for his career, Trey's only averaging 15.4 field goal percent. 15.2 field goal attempts for his career. 15.4 this season, and since December 1st, he's been up to 16 field goal attempts per game. That number has to get up closer to 18 or 19 on a regular basis, on average. You're not going to get to 20 every night. That's a hard number to get to, but it's got to pick up 1 or 2 shots because the efficiency, again, for Trey this year, career highs in points, rebounds, assists, steals, field goal percentage. He's shooting the second best 3-point percentage of his career and the second best free throw percentage of his career. And that's in slightly more minutes than last season with slightly fewer shots than last season. So he's putting up career best numbers in more minutes but fewer shots. He's on pace to match his career high to break his career high in starts but he's not going to make his career high in games played. He played that was 79 in his second year. He can't match that obviously because he's missed too many games. But when you look at where Trey is, and we talk about his value, the pairing of him with Queen offensively has worked, and there has been a much more the shots have gotten better under James Borrego. The data is clear on that the Pelicans are getting better shots on a night-to-night basis with Borrego. They're not making them, but they are getting better shots. So Trey is taking advantage of that, but now they've got to continue to ramp that up. They've got to get that average of shot attempts closer to 20, because if somebody's giving you that kind of efficiency, and that is elite efficiency, when you talk about the shooting percentages, when you talk about the scoring production, we talk about the rebounding as well. It's not like he's slacking off on the rebounding when he gets those opportunities either. He's also continuing to rebound at a high level in those games. He's continuing to pass the basketball in those games. So Trey needs to increase his selfishness, and at the same time, the Pelicans have to work a little bit harder to get him shots, because he should not be averaging a career low in field goal attempts this season when you have 9 wins. It does not make sense for Trey Murphy to be averaging just over 15 shots a game when your team has 9 wins. They have got, especially if you're trying to find out what this team is going to work for the future. If you're going to build, and if this is also equating your value for Trey Murphy too. I think as teams see this around the league, if you decide that you want to move Trey Murphy, these games are showing you that he can be an elite second guy, not the guy. It's hard. I don't think he's set to be the guy. But Trey on his own right now is producing at the best level we've ever seen him do it. And if the Pelicans can find him, just over these last 4 games, again, 31.7 boards, 4.5 assists on just 21 field goal attempts per game. You are hoping for a good shooter to give you just over 1 point per shot. Trey is giving you 1.5. Right? Trey's giving you 1.5. That is elite efficiency. And the Pelicans have to find a way to capitalize that and increase his volume without throwing the balance completely off. It is difficult to do that when you have 2 rookies. It is almost impossible to do that when you have 2 rookies. You cannot win when you have 2 guys under the age of 20 in the immediate future in your starting lineup. Guys in their first year, one who's just should be a year out of high school. It's almost impossible to win. But the Trey and Zion pairing has not been as good as it's been in years past. I mean, it just hasn't. It hasn't. And Zion is the big contributor in that. Like I say, his value has decreased in the previous years for those folks who are just hopping in. I talked about this earlier in the first segment. Zion, typically in his career, his on-off, he was in the top 3 every season for the Pelicans. Top 3. Most times 1 or 2. But in the top 3 every season. This season, he's like 8th. His on-off is 0.5. The Pelicans are barely noticeable as far as the difference goes, whether he's on or off the court, in the same amount of minutes that he played last year. Last year, he was much more impactful. Much more impactful. On a team that was bad. And at the very least, you can say that he has at least the same kind of offensive production around him, or a better group, because Brandon Ingram didn't play with him last year. He didn't play a single game with Herb Jones last year. He didn't have a Sadiq Bey. He didn't have a Trey Murphy. So why is Zion's production and his value going down even to the Pelicans? Before, at least you could say, and I hate going backwards, but I just saw a couple of comments that kind of pushed me to it. If you were getting the same impact from Zion, at least in the past, you could say he's more valuable to the Pelicans than he would be anywhere else, that he always produced for the Pelicans. But his aggressiveness, his speed, even with the reduction in weight, you don't see the same kind of consistent speed out of Zion. You don't see the same kind of aggression out of Zion. It comes and it goes. You see it for a quarter, and he dominates for a quarter, and then It's gone again. You're not seeing stacking of 4 quarters of consistent play for him, not even 3 quarters of consistent play. You've gotten good quarters, you've gotten good halves. You've not gotten a dominant game out of Zion Williamson this season, not a dominant one. You've had some good ones. And I think part of it is that physically, he is not the guy that he was 2 years ago. I think he's still athletic, certainly, but he's not the guy that he was athletically 2 years ago. And then the other part to me is his mentality, and we've criticized that. He was given the opportunity this season to assume the role of franchise player. Everything was moved out of his way. Everything, every impediment was taken away for him to assume the responsibility, not just the title, but the responsibility of being the franchise player. And he chose not to take it. You don't see him being a leader on the court. You don't see him rallying his team. When the vibes are good with the Pelicans and everybody's smiling and giggling and laughing when they're on a run, everything's cool. But as soon as it gets bad, gets bad on the court, who's stepping up? Why is DeAndre Jordan the most vocal guy? Yes, he's the most experienced, but why? This isn't his team. So why is that the case? And why hasn't Zion Williamson assumed that role? We were told that this was a different Zion Williamson. And it's just not. It's just not. And that is unfortunate. Before we get into the Nuggets and the Pelicans tomorrow, hey, it's Liam, 8049. Ask you about the hole we're going to see with I see a way out of this without moving at least 3 of the rooks and Trey and Herb. I don't think you have to move everybody. I think that would be an overcorrection for this problem. I think the number one priority is getting rid of some other players first. And I think you can get out of a lot of this hole. Pause. You can get out of this situation if you start with the players who are contract problems. So you've got to move Jordan Poole. You've got to move DeJounte Murray. I would even move a Jose Alvarado at this stage because I think Jose's value to the Pelicans now has diminished because the Pelicans are not close enough to be good. Jose Alvarado is no longer a luxury that you can afford. He's not even a necessity for you anymore. He is a player that you need to move and hopefully get some draft capital back from a team that needs a backup guard going into the playoffs. So if you're gonna take, I think that those are the players. Getting rid of those kinds of guys. Jordan Hawkins, whatever you can get. These are primarily salary dumps, except in the case of Zion. I think what you want when you talk about Zion, and I've talked about this before, I'd rather get a couple of expirings, and that's why I've proposed that Detroit deal. And it's not about the players. It's about getting the expiring deal so that you don't make another financial commitment to somebody while you're trying to clean up your house and get those pieces around your rookies. So you want to take back expiring contracts with knowing that you can take a conditional first rounder down the road. It may not be in this upcoming draft. You may have to take a one that's a couple of years away. But the way Zion's situation is now, I think that's your best option. You know, I think you're looking for the best possible value. And if a team will give you some bad contracts that are expiring of players that they no longer use, and I think the team that takes a risk on Zion is not going to be a team that views him as a franchise player. They will view him as the second or the third guy with a high upside. So that's a limited number of teams that you're looking at. And I think that that's the biggest thing that going forward is who are the teams that are either going to be desperate enough to view Zion, like nobody's going to give you franchise player. They're not going to give you multiple picks. If you want multiple picks, you're talking about Trey and Herb. Trey in particular, the way he's playing right now, yeah, you could get 3, maybe 4 ones for Trey Murphy right now. But again, it matters who the partner is, right? Like that matters. Where do those picks come from? And what does their future look like? Because you want the Pelicans to be wise in what they do. I don't see a lot of validity in the Bulls rumors because I don't like what you would get back. You're not getting anything that really helps you. You could get players that can't defend, and that's the biggest problem the Pelicans have. Everything that's been proposed is guys who can't defend. Like, any combination that they've tried it with Vucevic, they've tried it with a number of guys that's tried to figure out the Pelicans and the Bulls, making a deal for Zion. Let me look up the one that was, I think, the latest one today. Yeah. I mean, yes, we've heard that Zion is, the Zion possible interest. Um, and I think that is always one of those things that players will talk about and say that they, are interested. They never tell people that they're bad places. They don't ever talk about another city as a bad destination because you don't know if you're going to end up there. And I don't think that it works as a team for the Bulls, but maybe, maybe. As we look for tomorrow, Pelicans back at home against the Nuggets. Pels have lost 5 in a row at home. They've lost 5 in a row to Denver. Jose, Sadiq Bey, and Herb are all day to day. Jose, though, is probably, as James Borrego updated today, 2 weeks away. But he says Bey and Herb are closer to being ready. I don't think that means that they'll be available tomorrow. Then when you look at Denver, this is a game the Pelicans have to win. This is a game the Pelicans have to win. Because Denver is without Cam Johnson, Nikola Jokic, Jonas Valanciunas, Christian Braun, and Murray. The whole squad is gone. This is one the Pelicans have to win. There's no excuse for this one. As bad as they've been, 9-32 bad. This is a game that is a gut check game. You're at home. You just got embarrassed in Orlando. You are playing a depleted Nuggets team. You got to win this game. You got to win this game. I think that that's clear, that if the Pelicans blow this game, that it's going to be, to me, an utter embarrassment. You can't lose this game. Not with everybody gone, except for Aaron Gordon. But Aaron Gordon now, if Aaron Gordon goes off, then you know Zion Williamson didn't play well defensively. You know Trey Murphy probably didn't play well defensively. Because Aaron Gordon, this is a game where he should not be able to go off. Because there's not a lot of shot creators out there on the floor. But what happened the last time? Pelicans gave up a bunch of threes to guys who you never heard of. So defensively, what are they going to do? If the Pelicans give up 110, 115 points to these Nuggets, they better be scoring 140. Like this should be a bad offensive night for the Nuggets, and the Pelicans should be taking advantage of it and trying to outrun them in transition. But they got to defend the three. They got to defend the three. The last time the Pelicans beat the Nuggets, they won 101-94. That was in 2024. The Brandons led the Pelicans that night. Brandon Ingram at 29, Brandon Boston at 19, and Jokic did not play that night either. So it could be a perfect storm for the New Orleans Pelicans, a chance to win a game. And I don't know when the next chance will be, but this is as good as it's going to get maybe this week. And this is when you have to have. Because once again, the natives are restless. The fans are not happy. Not when you get this effort. Not when you play that way down the stretch. Not when you miss. I think they went 1 for 5 in the last 5 minutes with multiple turnovers. You stopped playing defense at the start of the quarter, and then you couldn't shoot at the end. And part of that is because you do have the rookies out there. Part of it is on the rookies because, and again, you're not assigning blame, but you are acknowledging the fact that you don't have somebody late in the game who can create shots for people. That was supposed to be Zion Williamson, right? In the fourth quarter, you were supposed to be able to give the ball to Zion Williamson and have him either dominate by scoring points or because he was going to collapse the defense, then other guys would get shots. And that did not happen against Orlando. And it has not happened this season, except for maybe once. So, it's fine for Zion to be averaging 23 points a game since December. He's averaging 23 points a game since December too. But they have not been impactful points. He's been a good points on bad team guy right now. So I think that's your judgment tomorrow. What are you looking for? Can the Pelicans guards stop anybody? Against these guards, they should be able to get some stops, some turnovers. If they're giving up threes like they did the last game, and then the other part is designed to defend Aaron Gordon. If Aaron Gordon's putting up 30 tomorrow, that ain't good. All right, that's going to do it. I thank y'all for joining me. I think I'll certainly be doing multiple of these this week, so tune in as you can. I don't think we'll be doing one tomorrow, but we'll see. But I'll keep you posted as always. Make sure you follow, like, subscribe, share, comment, all of that good stuff. Till the next time, this has been the Post Up right here on Boot Crew Media. I'm David Grubb. I'll talk to you later.
What's up, guys? We have an awesome deal going on with the Game Time app. Make sure you use code BOOT to get $20 off your first purchase. I personally always use the Game Time app. There's no late hidden fees. You get to view your seat from where you want to sit in the stadium or the arena. And I absolutely love using the Game Time app. So make sure there's a lot of games coming up with the Pelicans, a lot of games coming up with LSU, Tulane, you name it. Make sure you use Game Time app and use code BOOT to get $20 off your first purchase.